She beat cancer twice. She survived when doctors said the odds were against her. But the man sleeping beside her every night was killing her with a secret he kept for 8 years. By the time she found out the truth, she had 48 hours left to live. This is the story of Jessica Morgan, a fighter who couldn't survive the betrayal that came from inside her own home. It was March 31st, 2022, when Jessica Morgan received a phone call that would shatter what little time she had left. Her doctor's voice was gentle but urgent. He needed her to come to the hospital immediately. Jessica was 46 years old, a department manager at a retail store in Charlotte, North Carolina, and a mother of 2 daughters. She had beaten breast cancer twice, in 2017 and again in 2019. But despite being declared cancer-free, her health had continued to decline. She was constantly sick, always exhausted, fighting off infections that wouldn't go away. Her weight had dropped to 95 pounds. Something was destroying her immune system, and no one could figure out what. That's why she had gone to Duke University Hospital for a second opinion. That's why the doctor was calling. Jessica asked her daughter Riley to drive her to the appointment. They sat in silence during the 40-minute drive, both preparing for bad news. When they arrived, the doctor led them into a private room, sat down across from Jessica, and said the words that would destroy her world. "Mrs. Bennett, you have AIDS, not HIV. AIDS, the final stage where the immune system has been completely destroyed. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos." Jessica stared at the doctor, unable to process what she was hearing. AIDS? How was that possible? She had been married to her husband Marcus for 8 years. Before that, she had been faithful to her first husband for 15 years. She didn't use drugs. She hadn't had blood transfusions. The doctor explained that she had likely been living with HIV for years, possibly since the beginning of her marriage to Marcus, and that the virus had slowly destroyed her immune system. That's why the cancer kept coming back. That's why she couldn't fight off infections. That's why her body was failing. Riley began sobbing beside her mother. Jessica reached for her daughter's hand, trying to comfort her even as her own world collapsed. Then she asked the question that would change everything. "How did I get this?" The doctor explained that HIV is primarily transmitted through sexual contact. He asked if her husband had ever been tested. Jessica felt her stomach drop. Marcus. It had to be Marcus. There was no other explanation. When they got home that evening, Marcus was watching television in the living room. Jessica walked in, her face pale, her hands shaking. She stood in front of the screen and asked him directly, "Do you have HIV?" Marcus didn't move. He didn't look surprised. He didn't ask why she was asking. He just stared at her with a blank expression and said, "Yes." Jessica's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the couch. "How long have you known?" she whispered. Marcus looked away. "Since 2006. 2006. That was 8 years before they even met." He had known he was HIV positive for 8 years before he married her, and he had never told her. He had watched her go through chemotherapy twice. He had watched her body deteriorate. He had watched her suffer. And he had said nothing. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jessica's voice was barely audible. Marcus shrugged. "I didn't think it mattered. I was on medication. I didn't think I could pass it to you." But that wasn't true. HIV can still be transmitted even with medication, especially if someone isn't taking it consistently. And Marcus had never encouraged Jessica to get tested. He had never suggested protection. He had never given her the choice to protect herself. Riley, who had been listening from the doorway, ran to her mother and screamed at Marcus, "You killed her. You killed my mom." Marcus stood up, grabbed his jacket, and walked out of the house without another word. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just left. That was the last time Jessica saw her husband. To understand how they got to this moment, we need to go back to where it all began. Jessica met Marcus Bennett in the summer of 2014 at a church barbecue in Charlotte. She was 38, recently divorced after 15 years of marriage, and a single mother to 2 teenage daughters, Riley and Madison. She wasn't looking for love. But Marcus, who was 47 and worked as a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing plant, had a quiet confidence that drew her in. He complimented her. He listened. He asked about her daughters. By the end of the evening, they had exchanged numbers. Over the next few months, Marcus became a constant in Jessica's life. He brought her coffee at work, helped fix things around the house, and treated her daughters kindly. Jessica's best friend Angela felt uneasy about Marcus from the start, though she couldn't explain why. There was something about the way he watched Jessica, something too calculated. But Jessica was happy, and Angela didn't want to ruin that. So she stayed quiet. By December, Marcus proposed. It wasn't romantic or grand. He did it on a Tuesday night in Jessica's living room while they were watching television. But Jessica said yes, because she believed she had found someone who would stand by her through anything. They married in March of 2015 in a small ceremony at the church where they met. In the wedding video, you can hear Jessica's vows clearly. She promises to love him in sickness and in health, to trust him with her whole heart. Marcus's vows are shorter, quieter, and when you listen closely, you notice he never promises her honesty. He never promises her truth. For the first year, everything seemed fine. But by late 2016, Jessica started noticing changes in Marcus's behavior. He became secretive with his phone. He worked longer hours. When she asked about it, he said he was trying to get a promotion. She wanted to believe him. Then in March of 2017, Jessica received devastating news. She had breast cancer, stage 2, aggressive. She needed immediate surgery and chemotherapy. Jessica was 41 years old, with 2 daughters who needed her. She couldn't be dying, but the tests didn't lie, and within weeks, she was in surgery having a mastectomy. Marcus was there physically during her recovery. He drove her to appointments and picked up prescriptions, but emotionally, he was distant. He didn't hold her when she cried. He didn't reassure her when she expressed fear. Riley noticed how Marcus would leave the room whenever their mother broke down. One night, Riley confronted him in the kitchen, asking why he wasn't more supportive. Marcus looked at her with an expression she would never forget. Cold, empty. "Your mother is strong. She doesn't need me to baby her," he said, then walked out. Riley realized her stepfather might not actually love her mother. But what could she do? Her mother was fighting cancer. She stayed silent, carrying her suspicions alone. Jessica went through 6 brutal months of chemotherapy. She lost her hair and 30 pounds. She spent days too weak to move. But she survived. By October 2017, doctors declared her cancer-free. Jessica wept with relief. She posted on social media about being a survivor. Marcus congratulated her with a hug that felt obligatory. He didn't cry or celebrate. He just said, "I'm glad you're okay," and went back to watching television. Jessica tried to rebuild her life. She went back to work part-time and spent more time with her daughters. But her body kept betraying her. She was constantly exhausted despite sleeping 10 hours a night. She had persistent infections and unexplained fevers. Her doctor said it was probably her immune system recovering from chemotherapy. Jessica tried to be patient, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. Then, in June of 2019, the cancer returned, this time in her lymph nodes. Stage 3. Jessica felt like she was drowning. How could this be happening again? She had done everything right. Her oncologist recommended another round of even stronger chemotherapy. Jessica went through it all again. The nausea, the exhaustion, the feeling of being torn apart from the inside. But once again, she fought. And by December 2019, she was declared cancer-free for the second time. Her family threw a celebration dinner. Her daughters made a banner. Everyone hugged her and told her how proud they were. Marcus sat at the end of the table, barely participating, barely smiling. When Riley asked why he wasn't more excited, he shrugged and said, "I am." I just don't need to make a big show of it. But it wasn't about not making a show. It was the absence of genuine emotion, the lack of relief that his wife had survived death twice. If you had been married to someone who beat cancer twice, how would you have reacted? Would you have celebrated with everything in you? Or would you have remained cold and detached? Think about that. Because Marcus's reaction would later become one of the most chilling pieces of this puzzle. Despite being cancer-free, Jessica's health continued declining throughout 2020 and 2021. She developed chronic pneumonia and recurring infections. Her weight dropped dangerously low. Her doctors were baffled. They ran every test imaginable but found nothing. Jessica's mother suggested she get a second opinion at Duke University Hospital. In January 2022, Jessica made an appointment. The doctor ordered comprehensive blood tests, including tests her previous doctors hadn't thought to run. One of those tests was for HIV. That test would reveal the truth that Marcus had been hiding for 8 years. Jessica was admitted to the hospital the night she confronted Marcus about his HIV status. Her body was shutting down rapidly. The AIDS had compromised her immune system so severely that even the smallest infection could kill her. Doctors started antiretroviral therapy. But it was too late. The damage was done. Riley and Madison stayed by their mother's side, holding her hands, begging her to fight. But Jessica knew she was dying. On the morning of April 2, 2022, just 2 days after her AIDS diagnosis, Jessica Morgan took her last breath. She was 46 years old. Riley was holding her hand. Her mother's last words were, "I'm so sorry I couldn't stay." As if she had failed them by dying. As if it was her fault. How do you process that kind of betrayal? The person you loved, the person you trusted with your life, knowingly infected you with a deadly disease and watched you die without ever telling the truth. If this happened to someone you loved, what would you do? How would you seek justice? After Jessica's death, her family was consumed with grief and rage. Riley, Madison, their grandmother, and Angela hired a private investigator to look into Marcus's past. What they discovered was even more horrifying. The investigator found medical records showing Marcus had been diagnosed with HIV in 2006, 8 years before marrying Jessica. He had been prescribed medication but frequently missed appointments and refilled prescriptions inconsistently, meaning his viral load was likely high enough to transmit the virus. The investigator also discovered Marcus had been married before. His first wife died in 2003 from complications related to a weakened immune system. The cause was never determined. Jessica's family began to wonder if she wasn't his first victim. Then the investigator found that Marcus had been in at least 3 other relationships between his first wife's death and meeting Jessica. The investigator tracked down 2 of these women. Both agreed to be tested. Both tested positive for HIV. When news of Marcus's arrest broke in July 2023, a 3rd woman came forward, then a 4th, then a 5th. All had been in relationships with Marcus. All tested HIV positive. None had been told about his status. With each news broadcast, more women called the police. By the end of the investigation, 7 women had come forward, all HIV positive, all claiming Marcus never disclosed his status. The prosecutor, District Attorney Rachel Kim, charged Marcus with 3 counts of reckless conduct for the other women. But Jessica's family wanted more. They wanted murder charges. "He killed my mother," Riley told the prosecutor. "He knew he had HIV. He knew what would happen. He watched her get sick and did nothing. That's murder." She presented the case to a grand jury with medical records, testimony from victims, and evidence from the private investigator. In April 2025, Marcus Bennett was indicted for 1 count of malice murder and 1 count of felony murder in Jessica Morgan's death. The trial began in September 2025. The courtroom was packed every day. Jessica's family sat in the front row. Marcus sat at the defense table in a gray suit, his face emotionless, never meeting their eyes. The prosecution's case was devastating. They presented Marcus's medical records from 2006. His doctor testified that Marcus had been inconsistent with medication and warned multiple times about disclosing his status. They presented Jessica's medical records, showing her declining health, 2 cancer diagnoses, and finally, her AIDS diagnosis 2 days before death. A forensic epidemiologist testified that genetic sequencing proved the HIV in Jessica's blood matched the strain in Marcus's blood. He had infected her. Then the other women testified. One by one, they told their stories. Marcus had pursued them, charmed them, never mentioned HIV, never suggested protection. When they got sick and tested positive, he disappeared. The most powerful testimony came from Tanya, who dated Marcus in 2012. She testified that when she confronted him after testing positive, he laughed and said, "That's your problem now, not mine." The courtroom gasped. Riley began to cry. She couldn't believe someone could be that cruel. The defense argued there was no proof Marcus intentionally infected Jessica, that she could have contracted HIV from another source, but the evidence was overwhelming. He had known his status for 16 years before Jessica died. He married her without telling her. He watched her suffer through cancer twice without suggesting she get tested. He walked out when confronted and never returned. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On October 12, 2025, they returned guilty on all counts. Marcus Bennett was convicted of malice murder, felony murder, and 3 counts of reckless conduct. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. When the verdict was read, Riley collapsed in her sister's arms, sobbing. Marcus showed no emotion. He was led out in handcuffs, his face blank, as if Jessica's life hadn't mattered at all. In the weeks after, Riley spoke publicly about her mother's case. She wanted people to understand that HIV transmission can be a crime, that knowingly infecting someone is violence. She started a foundation in her mother's name to raise awareness about HIV disclosure laws and support survivors. Today, the 7 women who came forward are alive and managing their HIV with medication. But they carry the weight of what Marcus did every day. They think about Jessica, the woman who didn't survive, who fought so hard but never got to see her daughters grow up. This story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about trust and the responsibility we have to people we love. If someone knowingly infects another person with a life-threatening disease, is that murder? Jessica's family believes it is. The jury believed it is. So, let me ask you, if you were Jessica and found out 2 days before your death that your spouse knowingly infected you and watched you suffer, what would you want to happen to them? And if you were Riley or Madison, watching your mother waste away and discovering the truth after she was gone, how would you move forward? Jessica Morgan was a fighter. She beat cancer twice. She raised 2 incredible daughters. She worked hard, loved deeply, and trusted completely. She deserved to grow old, to see her daughters marry, to hold her grandchildren. But Marcus Bennett took that away. While he sits in prison, Jessica's family lives with her absence. Riley still picks up the phone to call her mom before remembering she's gone. Madison hears her mother's voice in her head during difficult decisions. Their grandmother keeps Jessica's favorite sunflowers on her kitchen table. Angela visits the cemetery every Sunday. They carry Jessica with them. They honor her memory. They fight for her legacy. So, where are you watching from? Have you known someone betrayed in a way that put their life at risk? Let us know in the comments. And if this story moved you, please share it. Jessica's story matters. Her life mattered. Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, click that subscribe button so you never miss our upcoming true crime documentaries. We'll see you in the next one.